NVIDIA tonight, a few hours away from the company's first quarter results coming after the close. Stock is near the break-even point for the year and up more than 40% from those lows. Bullish analyst Dan Ives is here at Post 9 talk about what he expects for the quarter. He's got a buy rating and a target of 175. Dan, good morning.
Yeah,
good to see you. What do you think is going to be the story tonight?
I think it's all going to be about what demand looks like. Obviously, China will be the headwind in terms of H20. But what they see from sovereigns and ultimately more and more enterprise. And we think in terms of big tech CapEx, that's actually going to exceed $325 billion. So I think the net, this is going to be one, when you hear from the godfather of AI, Jensen, it's going to be bullish. I view it as a bright green light for tech because it's going to show, despite the fears, demand still outstripping supply 8-1, even when you X out China.
What do you think, what is his calculus on China? He's got so many different constituencies to please on that one, right?
Look, I think it's a $3 billion headwind basically going into this quarter, but I think that's something that's already started factored in. I think the way the street's going to look at the quarter, it's less focused on the quarter. It's more on, okay, what does Middle East be? What is sovereigns? What does that bring in? And I think for him, it's a balancing act because he needs to play nice in the sandbox when it comes to 202 area code, but also doesn't want to give away that China business to Huawei. And that right now is that sort of balancing act for Jensen.
Do you think their product rollout schedule is back to being smooth? Fewer hiccups like we saw in 24?
Yeah, we saw much less hiccups in terms of supply chain, everything we saw in Asia. Yeah. And I think it just comes down to, Carl, like there's one chip in the world fueling the AI revolution, and it's led by Jensen and NVIDIA. And I think even though others trying to narrow the gap, that's the reality. And I think also speaks to Trump administration knows their big poker chip in all this negotiation. It's NVIDIA as well as Apple.
So so the cancellation of the diffusion rule. This was like a big deal on the Middle East trip that they went on. Is that going to be reflected in guidance?
So I think it's still too early there, but based on our estimate, I mean, we think this ultimately opens up another $1 trillion of market opportunity, not just for NVIDIA, but for AI revolution. When you think about Middle East, all the data center build outs, what this ultimately means. And I think the commentary that Jensen's going to talk about is what they see in the pipeline. That's why, in our view, the quarter, okay, I think guidance will be generally in line, maybe slightly better. But I think what the street's focus on is what does this mean for medium-term outlook? Does this change any of their sort of plans? And I think this is going to be a huge vote of confidence for the AI revolution. In my opinion, this is going to be a catalyst that you'll see tech.
Featured trade of the day, and that is NVIDIA landed. It's finally here. We can finally talk about it. The question is, are they still, what inning are we in? Are they still growing at the same pace? How long can this last, Landon? I mean, it's amazing. CapEx remains elevated during this global sell-off. Jensen Huang never wavered, never backed down, never mentioned anything in terms of a slowdown. He's out there in the Middle East with President Trump, announcing deals. It's a pretty exciting time, but what does your data tell us about NVIDIA and their potential or actual dominance?
Sure. I'll tell you what, my opinion on what inning we're in is I think we're in maybe the top or the middle of the second inning. I think we're very early. When I see how fast AI has been advancing over the last 1 to 2 years, it's incredible. I mean, it reminds me of the dot-com era, 20 years ago, but at about 10x the pace. So it is advancing so quickly. And if you're not investing in it as a company, you're getting left behind. And so there's so much pressure to do this AI hyperscaling, as they call it. You have to invest in these AI chips. Meta, Alphabet, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, they all got the memo. They're doing it. And you can see, I mean, the amount of spending going into AI is just ramping up, and I think it's going to turn exponential soon. I think it's obviously gaining traction here. It may be exponential already. It's not linear anymore. So I think we're very early, even though it feels like we're late, because AI can't do all the things that it will do, and it's going to be doing some amazing things. And so when I look at NVIDIA in particular, I mean, they've, obviously they're the leader. They've done fantastic. Their revenue last quarter was up 78%. Their data centers, I think, were plus 93%. Gaming, which if you don't remember, NVIDIA was at first they were a graphics card company for gaming, and I always swore by the GeForce cards; those were amazing. Their gaming division was down about 11% year over year. That's not a big concern, but their original equipment manufacturing plus 40%, autonomous driving and robots plus 103%. That one's going to continue to grow very quickly. So, we used to talk about this company and we used to frame it as, well, they've got bets on gaming, they've got bets on cryptocurrency, and they've got bets on AI. And now you're like, yeah, okay, gaming, whatever, cryptocurrency, whatever, AI is it. And so that bet is paying off, and it's going to continue to pay off. I mean, these chips are $30,000 to $40,000 each, and they just can't keep up with demand. I mean, it is incredible how much people need these. And so, all of the advancement that we're seeing, I'd say that we're still very early. Like Folio's been bullish on this company for a long time. We've put out 5 separate bullish calls on it from April of 2020 over, up until the last month when it dipped below $100. And so, you can see here how NVIDIA is leading the pack. I mean, this is not a monopoly, but they're definitely the dominant player with over half of the interest compared to Intel and AMD. But those are also, those are up and coming companies, which is weird to say about Intel and AMD. But in this space, they are. They're trying to take bites out of NVIDIA. But I think that the pie is going to grow so quickly and become so large that AMD can be a huge winner in this space. Intel can be a huge winner in this space. NVIDIA is going to be a huge winner in this space. And so, obviously very bullish long term on this one. I mean, some of the stuff that they've done recently where they took the ability to train robots with humanoid interactions, and they took that from 3 months to 36 hours with their new processes. And so that kind of stuff, it's not going to be long before that 36-hour process becomes a 3-minute process and becomes a real-time process. And that's going to happen through their products. And so that's why I say, we're super early in this. And, I would still be willing to invest in NVIDIA. I liked it more. We put out a note to our clients, if it dips below 100, grab some. I think it got down to 88 for maybe a day. And everybody jumped on that with all the tariff scare, but it's bounced back up to 135. So it's not as attractive as it was, but it's still a very attractive buy long term. Short term, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of expectations going into this one, a lot of tariff concerns. How are they going to, downgrade and export their products? How much are they ramping up production in the U.S.? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But long term, you're not going to lose with this company. I mean, this is the pie is growing so quickly, and they've got over half of it.
In terms of EPS, we're expecting 85 cents a share. I mean, we kind of know the numbers that we're looking for. Dan, I want to go to you and get your thoughts on, one, what we should be excited about coming into these earnings and what we should be bracing for or worried about.
Well, you're right, Diane. I mean, it's kind of a conundrum coming into this NVIDIA first quarter 26 print, because you have a lot of analysts who are very worried that with this upcoming ban on the H20 chip, which is expected to create about a $5.5 billion inventory write-down, they're worried about the timing of that impact to revenues. Some people say it could be anywhere from $800 million to $1 billion on this first quarter 26 print, and up to maybe $5 billion in lost revenue on the second quarter print. And then there's other people or other analysts who see the strong growth that they're getting in their Hopper 200 and their Grace Blackwell 200 chips. And despite the ban in China and the lost revenue and the inventory write-down, their thinking is that we're going to see this offset that, and they're still going to beat the consensus in terms of estimates for revenue in this first quarter 26, which is about $43.5 billion. So that's kind of the conundrum right now, Diane, going on with NVIDIA stock. It'll be interesting to see. We'll know after the print.
We will certainly know. So, Jason, I'm curious to know your thoughts. What are you preparing for? What are you bracing for?
Yeah, Diane. So look, those are all interesting things to think about in the quarter that were just highlighted. And I think they're important if you're looking at the stock over the next 3 to 6 months. But as long-term investors in NVIDIA, we're looking at it longer term. So we're asking bigger questions like, what do the competitive dynamics look like, GPU versus XPU? Obviously, Broadcom has been doing quite well in that market with some of NVIDIA's largest competitors. So we're still watching that as we think out over the next few years. There's still a lot of growth at NVIDIA. There's no doubt about it. We know that AI CapEx, that AI infrastructure has been a theme that has been called into question this year, in particular due to DeepSeek, and then tariffs. There's been a lot of macro uncertainty. So analysts and investors have been looking, I think, a little more short term and saying, what does this mean for the AI build out and therefore demand for GPUs? But I think the reality is that demand continues to be robust. We're still in the early innings of the AI build out. It's going to continue to power ahead through this decade. And so seeing what Jensen says about demand over both the medium and long term, I think is going to be important. And oh, by the way, it's not just GPUs to the data centers doing LLMs. It's also things like robotics, which is a huge TAM. So it's going to be a lot to unpack in the quarter, to be sure, even with the short term moving pieces.
You think everything, I mean, if in fact you're right that everything gets floated upward.
I mean, look, and we've talked, obviously it started off white knuckles. We navigated through it. You've seen steps off the cliff in terms of de-escalation of tariffs. But it comes down to this is a fourth industrial revolution. And when you look at the amount spent, for every dollar spent on an NVIDIA chip, there's a $10 multiplier across the rest of tech. That's why you see from software to nuclear, ACO and others. And I think that right now, the use cases, as you've talked about a lot, use cases are playing out. Palantir, Snowflake, and I think you're going to see more.
So why is it flat this year, NVIDIA?
Because I think it's all about, right now, they're in the eye of the storm. And I believe this quarter is going to be a huge positive inflection point. We call it 175, bull case 225, to what I believe this is going to be the charge to not just but I believe $5 trillion market cap and look at the next few years, despite the tariff fears.
So you think, after the call today and when tomorrow we're sitting here, you might be on with us again, we're going to say, oh, now we've got what? We've got more visibility to 27 and 28 in terms of earnings, and you feel comfortable with the target price in the 200s?
And I think that's maybe even conservative relative to my view of physical AI. We're only 2% through in terms of AI penetration. Really zero Europe, zero in terms of Asia ex-China. So you start thinking, and there's only one chip fueling it. So my opinion continues to be the AI party. It started at 9 p.m. It's now about 10:30 p.m. Goes to 4 a.m. And it's led ultimately by, you look at Jensen, you look at the chip. You can't go anywhere without that. That's why Middle East, everyone's focused on, could I get up in line ahead of China? That continues to be the focus.
Fair to say that in the month of April, tariffs and policy darkened your view significantly, right?
There was an Armageddon moment.
Yes, I know. So I guess my question is, how confident are you there won't be a repeat of that?
Yeah, my view is just the de-escalation that we've seen from D.C. They recognize that some of what they were talking about was basically impossible, so they've had to de-escalate. Now you start seeing more and more negotiations. Look, will there be, some sort of tariffs? Is it going to complicate supply chain? Of course. Apple clearly needs to navigate its own situation relative to India. But my view is that now you're starting to get to a level set where if it's 10, 15% tariffs, you can navigate that, but that is not changing in terms of tech, in terms of AI spending, in terms of enterprise. And that's our view, that this is still, we're in the second inning of a 9-inning game relative to where AI plays. And that's why I think this is going to be an inflection point when you hear from Godfather of AI, Jensen.
Bring up a couple of really key points here. One, it's not only just artificial intelligence. NVIDIA seems to hit the waves at the right time for whatever is really popular. You talk about gaming, that's what they were kind of known for. And then crypto, they just happened to have a fact that their graphics chips were so good that you could utilize them for mining at home during COVID-19 and things of that nature. So they're just hitting the right strides. And you have to ask yourself, what's next for them after artificial intelligence, right? Is it quantum computing or what have you? That being said, a lot of great things being talked about. Landon, what's the biggest risk for this company going into this earnings announcement?
I think just expectations. I think that's the key. Is you've got you can hear me talking. I'm not alone in the way that I think about this company and how well they can perform over the next 5 to 10 years. And so if expectations are that high across the board, then any kind of dent in that armor is going to really send investors to the sell button. And so that's what we have to look out for. We have to, look at how's the competition catching up, which you can see here. NVIDIA's kind of hanging in there. AMD's making a nice little run at them. I don't think this is this should be the focus for investors because the pie is growing so quickly. They can all win, even at negative 3%. If the pie is growing more and more and more, if they hold on to half, it doesn't matter. Even if they go from 52% to 49% to 45%, the pie will double and triple and quadruple during that time. So the net is much, much larger anyway. So I'm not too concerned about that. Obviously, if you're an NVIDIA investor, you want to see them growing and no one else touching them. That's not the case. AMD is coming along. So they don't have that super monopoly position that you might want. But I think that, to answer your question, I think the threat is just high expectations, and can they continue to match those? I don't see a period in the next year or two where the demand for their products is going to slow. I just can't see it because of how incredible the technology that they empower is. The fact that their chips are getting better and faster, the technology is getting better and faster, there's going to be a demand. And just like I said, these large companies know that if they don't invest heavily into these chips and this technology, they will lose. It's not a maybe. It's not just like hey, let's try this and see if we can gain an advantage. It's like, no, this is table stakes now. You have to have this. And I think that with the mega corporations understanding that, they're all big buyers, and then any startup that wants to come along has to do this as well. This is just, they're going to have near infinite demand for this product moving forward, especially as robotics and autonomous driving become more and more reality. And then, like you said, quantum computing is just around the corner as well. So it's like, I think that AI is going to drive it all, but hey, you know what? I used to think gaming was going to drive it all for NVIDIA. So what's next for them? Maybe it is quantum computing. Long term, it's a home run to me long term, but short term expectations are the scary elements of this earnings report.
Yeah, Landon, think about it. AMD keeps saying they're going to compete, and then NVIDIA just keeps pulling away. And by the way, can you imagine being in Santa Clara, California, working for NVIDIA, and you go out to a restaurant and someone says, oh yeah, I work for NVIDIA. Oh, are you in AI? No, I'm in gaming. Down 11%. No, I'm in gaming. I'm not in the cool part of town. I mean, can you imagine? Gaming was the coolest thing ever, and now it's the ugly sister of the unbelievable GPUs that NVIDIA has.
Dan, I think Jason brought up a good point about look, the stock has had a strong run over the past month, but if you look at it, year to date, it's up about 1% now year to date. So it's almost like it's done this, round trip to where it's been. What's the catalyst from here? Can it regain some leadership when we think about the Mag 7? And does the resuming leadership of Mag 7 hinge on how NVIDIA performs?
Yeah, Dan, I think, we look at NVIDIA stock, it still trades at a pretty high multiple. It's about 40 times trail earnings, about 25 times forward earnings. Obviously, there's still a lot of excitement. Jason was alluding to some of the things down the road, which are fantastic for NVIDIA. We've been in the stock since 2019 before this whole AI thing exploded. So we've kind of participated in this rally, and we expect it to continue to go. But I think, Diane, going forward, it's going to be the transition that they make to the Blackwell chip. We're expecting about $20 billion in revenue on this upcoming quarter on the Blackwell chip. Should be about half of total revenue. So obviously, Diane, we know that NVIDIA has huge implications, not only in the chip sector, you mentioned the Magnificent Seven, but it's a huge driving force. So I think right now we just got to get through some of these doubts that I talked about, and everybody just can embrace the future, which Jason outlined very vividly, and also the opportunities that they have, especially with this new introduction of the new Blackwell chip, which should do extremely well.
Jason, what are you looking to hear from Jensen when it comes to the roadmap for that transition from Hopper to Blackwell, and also filling the hole when it comes to the export controls that have been created with regard to China?
Yeah, those are great questions. And I think, looking at Jensen's longer term vision in China is going to be important. We know that the revenue and really the growth contribution at NVIDIA from China has come down dramatically over the last let's call it 4 or 5 quarters. And so Jensen outlining kind of how they're thinking about China long term, because look, it's a big market, a big opportunity, and we certainly as investors don't want to see that thrown to the wayside. NVIDIA is not the only one struggling in China right now. Certainly there are others, but we're looking at the next couple of quarters in China as probably more of a throwaway and seeing what the setup for 26 and beyond looks like. So that's what we're going to be looking for in terms of commentary around China. But then again, looking at Blackwell, I think Dan made some great points. We're in the early stages of the Blackwell ramp, so we're going to see what the next 2 or 3 quarters look like there in terms of demand. Our expectation, it sounds like Dan's on the same page, is that we're going to see a pretty robust cycle for Blackwell. But guess what? We're moving quickly to Blackwell Ultra, and then we're going to Rubin. So, Jensen is staying out ahead of the curve. That's what NVIDIA does so well. They lead in computer science as far as semiconductors go, and we don't see them ceding that edge anytime soon. Again, the big competitive threat in our mind in terms of taking away incremental share is XPU demand over GPU, but we still think there's enough of a total addressable market over the next few years for all of these companies to enjoy pretty robust growth.
Yeah, well, that lines up with, I think, what the general thinking is, especially because the issue typically with NVIDIA is more about meeting the demand than actual supply.
Now, despite those headlines, most analysts out there, and there are a lot, remain bullish on NVIDIA, including your next guest, who sees 20% more upside from here. Joining us now is Vivek Arya. He is Senior Semiconductor Analyst at Bank of America Securities. Vivek, what are the main 1 or 2 things you're first going to look at tonight?
Hi, Brian. Yes, we described their guidance. The technical term we use is messy. And I think it's for 2 reasons. One is that the quarter that they will guide to, the current July quarter that they are in, this will face a big chunk of the restrictions on their H20 product that was destined for China. That's almost a $15 billion sales hit. I think the unknown is how much of that gets reflected in their guidance. We think it could be as high as 7 or 8 billion. That's a lot more than where consensus is in terms of that restriction effect. The second issue is product transition, that they are transitioning from the older Hopper generation, which was a lot more boards that they were selling, to the newer Blackwell generation, which is in very strong demand right now, but it does mean moving to more racks. So just the ramp cost of going to that new product generation. I think those are the 2 things that can make this current quarter guidance, as we described it, as messy. The good news is that as we get into the second half of the year, the demand environment is exceptionally strong. I think a lot of the China restrictions impact will be sized and priced by consensus. And number 3, the product transition effects that we described, we will be on the other side of it. And, the transition to Blackwell to B200 and B300, I think will be much smoother than what we have seen so far.
Vivek, our last guest, Michael Aroney, and others have suggested that the gains from AI are now moving away from NVIDIA towards the players who are deploying the technology to make their workplaces more efficient and so forth. Doesn't that feel like it's what's happening to you, that the moment for NVIDIA is kind of past?
Kelly, I would describe that debate as, half of the debate is that, there is no ROI on the spend. And the other half is, we are seeing too much ROI, return on this investment, and we are moving away from the infrastructure build. I think the answer is somewhere in between. There is still a few more years of infrastructure deployment that has to be done. If you look across most enterprises, and if you say that on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you in generative AI deployment? I think they're more likely closer to 1 than they are to 10. The second thing is this new breed of sovereign AI investor, right? And you mentioned before the investments that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the UAE are doing. They're just getting started on these infrastructure rollouts. So I think we have at least 2 or 3 more years of infrastructure deployments to be done. But it's great to see that this is being monetized by customers across a whole range of enterprise verticals. But I wouldn't say that is coming at the expense of infrastructure. I still think we have a few more years of very strong infrastructure deployment. I think we're only about a third of the way of infrastructure deployment right now.
A third of the way.
You know what's been amazing is that NVIDIA is where all the attention is, Vivek. I know you cover semiconductors. We did a little search this morning. This year, the best performing semiconductor stock is not NVIDIA. It's not even close. It's KLA. It used to be called KLA 10 Core, CLAC, if anybody remembers that. It's soaring this year. They make things that make semiconductors. Why is that stock doing so well this year?
Sure, Brian. No, it's a good observation. What we have seen so far this year is that the outperformers have actually been AI adjacent. So if you look at KLA, if you look at Lam Research, they make the machines that are used to make a lot of these AI chips. So we are starting to see the benefits more upstream in the supply chain. And if you look at other adjacent names to, the design software names, they have been also very resilient. So it is true that in the near term, some of the excitement has moved from the data center beneficiaries, such as an NVIDIA or a Broadcom. But we think this is more a cyclical effect. I do think that as we look out in the future, I think the core of the data center beneficiaries are going to be these names, such as an NVIDIA or a Broadcom. But at the same time, to make them successful, you will see the benefits spread out to these adjacencies in semi-cap equipment and design software tools.